Welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life, with psychologist and author of over 75 books, Dr. Barry Weinhold.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life with Dr. Barry Weinhold. My name is Ashley Russ. How are you, Dr. Weinhold?
I'm feeling grateful as usual.
Wonderful, me as well. You've inspired me to really get back to my gratitude practices, so thank
Did you?
you.
Oh, good. How do you do that? How do you do that?
So I have a journal, but otherwise I have been making it a point even during the day to find at least one thing a day where I consciously think about and say like thank you, maybe in my head, sometimes out loud,
Well,
which can freak people out if I'm talking to myself. And it's definitely been helping a lot. I've like gotten more into the practice lately, and it's hopefully
that's
this one will stick.
it's a great practice because, again, we only have a certain amount of time. We all have the same amount of time, and how we use it is up to us. And I could see not much better use than that. Of me to be able to take each day as it comes and feel grateful for what we receive and what we're able to do. And it's just a good way to spend our time.
It definitely helps me be more present, and have less of the anxiety of worrying of the future and depression of worrying of the past, and kind of hover in on what today is, and what I've been given. And yeah, it's a good centering practice.
Yeah, and I think and last month I talked about how the effect on the body of uh, our negative uh,
Mm.
thoughts and feelings, and it puts stress on our body.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite is true, and we can just be accepting and grateful for what we have. It puts less stress on the body.
Mm-hmm. Which we all need more of, I think.
Yeah, uh, I
So
need
what?
I need at least an hour of meditation every day in order
uh,
to keep my body from getting stressed.
It's definitely very important to make sure that you have that dedicated time. Unfortunately, a lot of us prioritize other things, so that's another good practice to get into.
Yeah.
So what are we working on today? What do you have for
Right.
us?
Well, we got a big one today.
Oh boy.
We're going to talk about shame,
Ah, yes.
and I mean, it's to me the most damaging. Well, any belief that has shame involved is probably some of the most damaging beliefs we can carry, and we typically act on our shame uh, by well, actually, it basically means that we feel like there's something wrong with us, so it leads to almost self hatred, and it's really kind of it's really where we can't really uh, appreciate who we are because we're hating those parts of ourselves, and it just it really it means that uh, we don't get to really enjoy life very much, and and in that self-hatred then can lead to being violent towards self and others. I want to talk about why people with self-hatred kill themselves or project their self-hatred on others and kill other people. So that's what I want to dig into today. And unfortunately, and some people don't even think about this, but it's so common that we don't even think about it. But almost all of well, first of all, men kill themselves more frequently than women. I don't know if you knew that. The statistics are almost 2 to 1. And so why is that? That's the other question I'm asking. Why did men kill themselves? And then almost all of our mass shootings are even shootings in domestic violence situations are men. So what is it about the makeup of men that produces this kind of violent behavior? That's what I want to look at today. I think it's really important to understand. And I work a lot with men, so I think I know male psychology about as well as anybody. And I've studied it, and I've written books about it. I wrote a 4-book series about male psychology. And so I think I have some things to say about that. So I'd like to take the list that I produced and have it up on the screen, and then I'll just talk about each one of the items on the list and give you some of my perspectives.
Did we want to check in with the 20 today again as
Well,
well?
we can. I mean, we're not going to be talking about in this episode any of the 20, but I will be getting back to that list in one of the later episodes this month.
Wonderful. Give me one moment. Make sure we have the right one.
Why males kill themselves and others more often than females. So, first of all, it's interesting to know that boys and girls do not develop at the same rate. And that's actually number 3. But typically, what's expected of boys often they're not able to achieve, and so a lot of the limit setting on their behavior is affects them, affects their ability to feel have much high self-esteem, and uh, particularly in mothers, particularly in the first stage, the infancy, they're mothers of caring and comfort. But when we get to the toddler stage, they have to become mothers who are policemen and have to set limits on their child. And some mothers are good at that, some aren't. And where you find a problem with this is too many no's during that toddler time. For example, the research done at UCLA concluded that by the time a toddler reaches the age of 2, he's heard the word no 200,000 times. Now that just blew me away when I read that. But I can tell, when somebody is saying, "Don't touch that," it's like, "No, no, no, don't, no, 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 don't touch that." So then maybe 5 or 6 no's in one one statement like that. And so, I mean, what really toddlers needed to feel good about themselves is about twice as many yeses as nos. Now, parents can do something about that by kid proofing the house. So they put everything up that they don't want the child to touch, so it can't touch it, can't reach it. Or they sometimes toddlers feel they're omnipotent; they can do anything, and so they jump off the side of the sofa and don't realize that that's going to hurt them. So you put pillows next on the side of the sofa, so they can still jump off and land in pillows and not hurt themselves. So there's lots of things you can do. And what I tell parents is that whenever you're disciplining your child, think of 2 things to replace every one, 2 yeses to replace every no. So, no, you can't do this, but here are 2 other things you could do. And that's the twice as many yeses as nos. So you can still have limit setting, but it doesn't have to be as uh, negative as it often is. And then the research also shows that boys are more sensitive than girls. And that's an interesting thing to me. I mean, people don't realize that boys are more attached to their moms than actually girls are, and that often becomes an issue later in their life if they haven't resolved their issues with their mother. But um, and so they're sensitive to any kind of disruption in their development. If the mother is depressed or is alcoholic or is has mental problems that prevent them from being totally present, boys will pick that up faster than girls will, and it'll have an effect on them. So it's really an important part of understanding the development of boys is that and we don't think of boys being more sensitive than girls because we think of, oh, the tough man, and how could they be more sensitive than than their counterparts? But the truth is, very early on, they are. And that may be partly due to number three, is that there are developmental differences between the developmental rates between boys and girls. And when a boy is born, he is about maybe 4 to 6 months developmentally delayed from what the girl would be at that age. And the reason for that is that all fetuses are female. And if the male is going to develop as a fetus, there are disruptions in the fetal development. And if it's going to stay as a female, there are no disruptions. And so as a result, just about 90% of any birth defects or even autism or other developmental problems occur to boys at birth. And in fact, even the SIDS, the sudden infant death syndrome, more that happens almost entirely to boys. Partly because of two, they're more sensitive, and three, because their developmental differences aren't understood by their parents. And so this developmental difference here doesn't really, the gap doesn't, it gets wide, gets wider. It can get as wide as a year and a half developmental differences. I mean, if you ever been in a sixth grade classroom, you'll see what the differences are. The girls are taller, more developed, and the boys are just tiny and underdeveloped physically. Now, there's some exceptions. Some boys will develop early, but in general, the average is that by about sixth grade, the development age is at least a year to a year and a half difference. And it closes by age 16, thank goodness. Boys catch up eventually. But in that catch up, they're always kind of behind the eight ball in school. I think schools should recognize this and not age grade boys and girls. They should be in different grades. The boys should be possibly a year um, younger than in grades than the girls. I knew this, and so my son didn't start till he was 7. He had a birthday in October, so it was okay. I was still under the whatever the rules were from starting school, and it really made a big difference in his school life because he didn't always feel a year behind his female classmates. And then in this number 4 is sort of the result of the developmental differences. Boys have a harder time meeting parental expectations. They also have a harder time meeting teacher expectations. And so they are often seen as slow or developmentally delayed. If you look at a special education classroom, 90% boys. So there's something about the development of boys that the educational system just hasn't picked up. And so, as I said, we shouldn't do age grading in schools. And then boys seem to have higher social expectations than girls. They're expected to be leaders and expected to be out there more visible, more on the front line of everything than girls are. Girls can kind of sit back and enjoy watching their male counterparts take all the risks, and so that is a bigger factor than I think most people understand. And I mean that one in itself would be a whole episode just talking about the social expectations of boys as how different they are from the social expectations of girls. So what I'm saying here that there are reasons to think about why a male might be carrying more anger and rage, and also some of it more self-hatred. Uh, and then finally, well, not finally, but the seventh one, boys are bullied more than girls in school. Now, that's the girls are catching up, unfortunately. They do more cyberbullying than boys, and but the actual bullying, physical bullying, is often by boys in school to either younger classmates or people, younger boys who haven't developed as much as they have, so they're smaller and easier to pick on. So that is a huge factor that is related. I mean, I don't know how many male clients tell me that they were bullied in school. And some of them are very bright people, lawyers and professors and engineers, but they were bullied in school and it had a lasting effect on their life. I remember at my 25th high school reunion, the one guy who was bullied the most in school was the brightest kid in the school. He turned out to be a nuclear physicist working at Hanford, Washington. And he told me that the bullying that happened in school 25 years later, this was the most difficult thing he ever had to deal with in his life. And it had a lasting effect on his personality and his behavior. And so we have to really look at what we're doing to protect our particularly boys from the kind of bullying they get. Girls need the same protection, but they don't often get the physical, in your face kind of bullying. The cyberbullying is much more emotional and subtle and rumors and things like that. But that can be just as devastating to girls. I'm not putting anything less on that, but I think that boys more often get the face-to-face kind of bullying that I'm talking about. And this next one, the lack of validation by their fathers, boy, is that a big one for boys. What boys need to hear from their father is, I'm really proud of you. Not I'm proud of what you did, but I'm really proud of you as my son. That's unconditional love. And I wish I had a buck for every client I have who has long-term effects of this, that they didn't get that validation. So sometimes I have them go back. I had one write a letter to his father, and then in subsequent meeting with his father to try to get that validation. Another had a father who died, and the son was still suffering because he never got that validation from his father. And so we did an empty chair uh, Gestalt process where we put the image of his father on an empty chair, and he said everything he needed to say, and then he asked for that validation from his father. Switched chairs, and his father gave it to him. I mean, that seems a little weird, but it works because people have this great hunger to be validated by their fathers, particularly. Now, often people can get that uh, by having mentors in their life, adult mentors, male mentors. And then the ninth one here, the failure to understand their personal psychology. Boys like girls. I mean, I don't think there's any difference here, but I think the effects might be a little bit more. A failure to understand their personal psychology. What if Ted Kaczynski got it, understood what was really the cause of his anger and rage at other people, and maybe he even got in therapy and did something about it, and it might have stopped him from being a mass killer. or attempt to be a mass killer. So I say that all of these factors contribute to low self-esteem in boys that can or that should lead to suicide, uh, or it can lead to it being this low self-esteem can be a cause for violence against others. And if you talk, I mean, I've studied a lot of the mass shooters and their psychology. And oftentimes, the other thing I probably should have put on the list is that they always send out warning signals that are ignored. And many mass shooters were targets. They were already in the law enforcement or in the criminal justice system for previous smaller offenses, but there was a pattern of their behavior towards others, a lack of respect for others, lack of respect for property, a lack of you know uh, any kind of earlier incident that may not have been uh, a mass killing, but they were all symptoms. I mean, the guy who shot up the parade in Highland Park this summer on 4th of July, uh, it- I think it was a year or so before that happened. The police were called to his house, and because he threatened to commit suicide. Well, basically, they didn't do anything. He should have been put under a 72-hour hold and examined for why he was suicidal, but they didn't. They kind of said, well, boys will be boys, and they would sometimes will threaten suicide and not mean it, and they didn't do anything. Then he was called back about 6 months later because that time he threatened to kill everybody in the house, and they still didn't do anything. So it's a somewhat a failure of our whole criminal justice system to recognize these symptoms and do something proactively to prevent them. That's, I think, another area which I could spend a lot of time with, talking about what we could do to prevent these. But I think this is mostly to try to help people understand why men tend to be more violent and kill themselves and others more frequently than women. And it's just a set of factors that we have not really totally understood in how we raise our boys in our society. And I think that if we really understood some of these things, we would change the way, perhaps the way we age grade in school. That would be huge. Or how to prevent boys from being bullied in schools. And also teach fathers about how important it is to validate their sons. So, I mean, there's things that could be done very easily. And the validation has to be an unconditional validation. It can't be, I'm proud of you for what you did. That's also important. But the real validation they're looking for is, I'm proud that you're my son. And not very, at least currently, the men that I see, so many of them never got that. That's one of the first questions I ask my male clients. Did you ever get validation from your father? And I explain what that means, and they say, no, it never happened. So I know that's part of the unfinished business that they have to figure out how to overcome that lack of validation because it has a long-term effect on them. You have any questions about all this, Ashley? I've been ranting along with this.
No, I think a lot of it makes sense, and I think that I can think of a few examples as you're going through things, and it's definitely something that I've struggled with. I have two boys,
Yeah,
and so knowing how to parent in a world where society doesn't give them the necessary support or sometimes sets them up for failure immediately can be very difficult. And it's definitely a learning experience, unfortunately. We all do our best that we can and use the information we have at the time. But I think that you're really correct that so much of it is just the unconditional love and support that oftentimes males aren't given because of the they're a boy and they should be, tough and things like that. That's an unfair judgment that, even as infants, it seems that we're encouraged to, like, oh, if your toddler is crying because they fell down, don't comfort them. Well,
Right, yeah.
that's how we ended up where we're at.
Or if boys express sadness and they cry,
Yeah, they're not allowed to cry.
boys don't cry,
And that's not, we're all human. And that's how your emotions get. You
Yeah.
have very difficult time managing your emotions if you don't know what to do with those feelings. And I can see how it contributes to a lot of the things on the list. So definitely makes sense.
Well, I have, knock on wood, in my almost 50 years of working as a therapist, I've never had a client kill themselves. I've had many of them threaten, but we were always able to. Well, I actually have a policy that if somebody is actively suicidal, I won't take them on as a client unless they provide me with a written no suicide contract that tells me that, and on the conditions are listed in there about what they will do instead of kill themselves if they get that desperate. And if they sign that and agree to it, then I'll take them on as a client. And that's, I think, helped me keep my record intact.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely true that now that I think about it, there are significantly more males, especially when you think of the public shootings and things like that. Honestly, I can't think of a female
Do you
one.
think of a single one where a female?
No, I can't.
No.
So it's a giant problem. And yeah, I think whether you're the person, the male that didn't get any of the things that you needed, or your parent, it's a very, very, very important subject to
Well, let's
increase your psyche.
right, exactly. That's all what it's all about. Is if you begin to understand a lot of this, and then you can change. And that's going to be the subject of next week's episode. Is how do you change any of these shame-based beliefs? And so I think that's what I want to focus on next time.
Wonderful. I'm excited to learn what I might be able to do for my boys because
Yeah,
it's such an important job, and um, I definitely want them to have the best opportunity that they can to understand themselves and their needs and their emotions. So until then, thank you so much, Dr. Weinhold. I appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to next week.
okay. I see I'm getting a little dark in here today.
We'll see you next week.
uh,
Bye bye.
bye.
For more information, please visit the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership at CICRCL.org or click the link in the show notes.